everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Pure Joy Podcast. This is Elena Love, your host, and today I'm here with Kedarji of the Bhakta School of Transformation. And I'm really excited to have him here today. Just a little bit about Kedarji. He's the founder of the Bhakta School of Transformation. It's an Ohio-based not-for-profit public charity, and it's devoted to lasting inner peace and total well-being. The curriculum offering includes holistic well-being coaching, plant-based nutrition coaching, and holistic healing practitioner certification. Its evidence-based research in holistic well-being alternatives is also offered. And in this regard, it's mostly notable that Kedarji's work in coaching people in the reversal of healing of diabetes, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. And programs are offered in meditation and chanting methods for spiritual growth and overall well-being. So welcome, Kedarji. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love that. So as you know, I'm plant-based. I teach people how to heal and transform and also to heal and reverse diabetes and other illnesses. So I love that that's a big focus of your school. And I also love that you have these 4 pillars. So I'd love to get into all of that today. So that, I would just love to hear from you kind of like what got you to start this school and a little bit about your background.
Growing up in my late teens, for a long time, I've had issues, one chronic health condition after the other. And growing up in my late teens, I had a very serious condition. I developed pneumonia in my left lung. They thought I was going to die. And then when I didn't, there was talk about removing my left lung. And so it took a long, long time to heal. I was on a lot of medications. And after that occurred, my mother became very concerned about my overall lifestyle and what I was putting into my mouth. I ate tons of processed sugar, lots of red meat and pork, lots of dairy. And she herself was attempting to make a change in lifestyle. And so she began to study a little bit about Oriental and Eastern medicine, and then started to read about a person named George Oshawa, who had started the macrobiotic movement in Europe and Asia. And macrobiotics originally is founded, as you probably know, on whole food plant-based food, along with meditation, etc. And so she got involved and she said, she gave me a bunch of books. You need to start reading this. Long story short, Oshawa came to New York to begin treating sick people with acupuncture. This was back in the days when acupuncture was illegal and chiropractic was illegal. And in New York State, if you attempted to practice these, they came and cuffed you and jailed you. And so Oshawa was in and out of jail a great number of times. And once we bailed him out, he went right back to his practice because he was healing people, even of cancers. So I was 9 years old when I met George Oshawa. He invited me into his patient room. I used to sit on his desk and watch him treat patients. It was just a wonderful privilege. And then years later, he left, he went back to Japan, and Michio Kushi, his top disciple, started the macrobiotic movement here, established the Kushi Institute. And so a number of years later, on the prodding of my mom, I entered the Kushi Institute. And I got my degree in Oriental medicine, Eastern medicine, acupuncture, acupressure, and hands-on healing. And then I had a practice in New York City for many years, and Michio supervised the first 2 years of that practice. And we were healing people without any medications, getting them off the medical treadmill, and people were really transformed. And as I was teaching other people, and of course applying some of the methods myself, I had not yet made the decision to change my lifestyle entirely. So as the universe would have it, right? This is what happens. There's an old saying that sometimes God has to knock you on your back before you look up. And so I had an event, and this was a huge turning point. I was really sick, didn't know it, went to my doctor. He did a urine test. He said, "You're not going home. You have to go right to the hospital emergency room." I said, "Why?" He said, "You're really sick." He wrote a note. I arrive at the emergency room. They take my blood glucose first. It was a fasting blood, 675, right? Now, I'm sure you're aware healthy fasting bloods are below 99 and really should be in the mid 80s. So I was walking around with these incredibly high, glucotoxic, right? And then subsequently, I was diagnosed, my liver had stopped functioning, my right kidney had stopped functioning. I had this medical team that read me the riot act, and they said, we have to remove your liver and your kidney. You're going to need transplants. You're going to be on these medications for the rest of your life. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Let's go through this list. It was a long list. And I said, what are these names and what about these side effects? And they said, look, don't worry. Yeah, they're going to be side effects, but we have other medications that will treat you, that will treat the side effects of these meds. And I said, okay, what are those? And they read me the list and I said, well, what about the side effects of those medications? They said, yeah, well, okay, but we've got other medications that will counter the side effects of the medications that we're giving you to counter the side effects of the initial list. I said, look, I'm going home for 2 days. I'm going to meditate. I'll give you my answer. And I walked away from my medical team and I realized, look, you have been working with Michio Kushi, helping to heal people, but you have not made the decision to change your lifestyle entirely. And so I finally did it. I healed myself of type 2 diabetes without any medications whatsoever. They did not have to remove my liver or kidney. Those were completely healed. And from that point on, I made a decision that I really have a duty to share with people what has not only worked for me, but healed me. And then in that period of time, I also met a fabulous spiritual mentor who really insisted that vibrant health is a part of the spiritual journey, which was unusual at that time, but really great. And so that was my turnaround. And that's what brought me into the field and what causes me to remain. My focus is if I have something that I know has benefited me and benefited clients and students, I have a responsibility to share it with the world in whatever little way I can.
Totally. I love that. And so how long, okay, so what age were you when you discovered that, you got this diagnosis, and how long did it take you to reverse these illnesses? And I'd also love to know, like, I know the macrobiotic diet, but like, was there anything specific that you were doing?
So I was just approaching age 20 when I got the first diagnosis. And from the time I made the decision to walk away from my medical team, 18 months
Wow.
to completely heal. 1 year to reverse everything, 18 months to heal. And the focus was what I now call my 4 pillars of total well-being, because I've seen this over and over again with clients. If you don't address the mental state and emotions, right, then people can adopt a whole food plant-based diet all they want, but they're going to revert back to bad habits like I did. Mm-hmm. And eventually they're going to get sick again. And so I had to decide, are you going to look at the whole? And are you going to treat the underlying cause, which really starts with the mind and the energy of the mind? And then how do we increase the energy of the mind and direct it properly? Well, that's spiritual power. That's the energy substratum of everything that we begin to experience in methods like meditation, etc. So it was a whole lifestyle change. And yes, absolutely, whole food plant-based had so much to do with it. However, as I've seen with many of my clients, if I had not made the change to improve my mental state, to gain emotional resilience, I would have never stayed the course with respect to whole food plant-based long enough to heal my physical condition and to heal my cells. So they're all interconnected. And I think to answer your question, it had to do with the integration.
Yes. And I totally agree with that because like you're saying, I've had so many people, myself included, that like we can follow all the rules and do, the plant-based and the raw foods and the healing, and it only goes so far because then people just kind of forget the reason why they're doing it. Oh, I feel good again. I'm going to go back and have pizza or
exactly.
Sugar. And so, like you're saying, we have to have that whole mind, body, spirit included in all of this. Otherwise, it won't work long term. And that's why people go on diets and they lose weight, they feel better, they reverse things, and then they go back to their old habits. We see this over and over again. That's why diets don't work. Exactly. So I love that you included these 4 pieces. And I would really love to hear about all 4 pillars because I think they're so important.
Sure. So the first I refer to as the spiritual power because in my experience, and we've actually got case studies of 30 plus years with students and clients to back this up, we are energetic beings. It starts with this. We actually, and we all forget this and we shouldn't, we live on a rock. that hangs in a void of space with nothing material with which to support it. It spins on an axis in an orbit around a fireball. And it does this in an orderly fashion for longer than anyone can remember. And we can, it's so orderly that we can pin 24 hours in a day on it with the rising and setting of the moon and the sun. We can pin 365 days on it with one rotation around the sun. This infers, and cannot be ignored, that there is a sacred law here, that there is a higher power, a highest power. It doesn't make sense to argue about labels. And I love talking with agnostics who don't believe in God because they believe in energy. So there's this energy substratum, and it's a conscious energy, and it's an awareness. And so we refer to it as the energy substratum of everything. And it's a spiritual power that can be harnessed with the right methods. And furthermore, modern science has confirmed it, particularly quantum physics, right? And now the science of epigenetics, which comes out of quantum physics and quantum mechanics. So we had this genius, Albert Einstein, who put forth a hypothesis that something material can be simultaneously a solid material form and an energy force field wave simultaneously, right? Einstein's theory of relativity. And that both of these can exist in a continuum together, and that something material can be expressed in its energetic form and in its concretized material form, right? And in fact, all of quantum mechanics that gave us computer technology, telecom, medical technology is based on this, right? So atomic particles have subatomic particles. Some atomic particles with our current instruments, when we attempt to diagnose what's in these subatomic particles, we come to nothing eventually that can be seen with these instruments. However, that nothing has an impact on what we can measure. So we have to infer that there's a power there, right? The basis of quantum physics. And so quarks and photons, right? Which in the Newtonian model were never recognized. And now we have photosynthesis, right? From light, light, right? The wonderful light that we get, that plants use to process electrons, to protect themselves from free radicals, to then emit what we breathe in as air, right? Which we couldn't live without. So this process of photosynthesis is also an energetic process. So we're energetic beings. The planet relies on this energy, and I say it's a spiritual energy because it's above what's material, right? And so we can harness it, and we have to harness it. Why? Because the mind is restless. And with a restless mind, we have nothing but fear, anxiety, frustration, doubt, worry, depression, anger, sarcasm, all the things that we're seeing today in the present coronavirus crisis, by the way. This is a restless mind. So how do we deal with the restless mind? Well, first we need power to address the energy of the mind to redirect it. That's spiritual power. So then we have improved mental state, right? Which I'm sure you know a lot about. We have to have methods to permanently improve our mental state so that the mind remains calm, at peace, while at the same time becoming sharper, while at the same time providing us with more mental clarity and increased mental energy, big part of what people need today. So there are meditation methods, one of which I hope to offer to your viewers at the end of today's interview, takes under 3 minutes, that we employ that actually increase both the clarity, energy of the mind, making the mind sharper while keeping the mind quiet, while keeping the mind from becoming restless, because when it's restless, all those qualities which are useless are what we have. That's what we're left with unless the mind is calm. So to improve the mental state, we first have to begin with making the mind calm and quiet. And you know, there's a saying we have, the mind loves the places it frequents the most. We get what we meditate on. We become what we obey. And so when we learn to harness the spiritual power to increase the energy of the mind in the right direction, we're able to improve our mental state to the point where every area of our well-being is impacted, every single area. As you well know, stress is higher and higher up on the list of things that cause chronic health conditions and disease. Well, with a calm mind and destroying fear, the mind that's absorbed in inner peace, stress is leaves, stress flees. So that's improved mental state. Now there's something else we have to address, right? How do we keep the mind quiet?
Mhm.
Well, now we've got these emotions, right? And so most of our students and clients we have observed in 30 plus years are used to riding the emotional roller coaster. And in fact, so much so that they enjoy the drama of it, right? Now, we have a thing called humanity, and it's a gift. And humanity must be expressed for us to be healthy. However, we've got to be able to express our humanity in a way that we don't become slaves to our emotions. Hmm? And there is a way to do this. So we employ methods where we help people freely express their humanity in a way that they become masters of their emotions, right? Do you have any children?
I did, but I don't have any at the moment, but I
Oh,
have.
that's okay. So, but you're aware, having mothered in any situation, that I'm sure that there were times where, the kids pushed you to the point where now you had to raise the bar, right? Now I'm going to have to raise my voice and get more stern. You didn't want to do it, but now I'm going to have to do it to get their attention, right? And so inside, you're smiling, right? Because now you know this is a role you have to play. You don't really want to play, but you've got to put on a different face. So
Yeah.
you get really tough with the kids. But inside, you're smiling. That requires a certain mastery of emotions where you can direct the emotions without being a slave to them so that you discipline your kids, but you don't feel bad about it.
Mhm.
Tough love, right? You know it was necessary, but it doesn't impact your mental state. That's just one example I can give of many, but it goes to the fact that we have to be emotionally resilient. Now, sometimes when I say this to people, they say, well, wait a minute, I'm in a relationship. What about, being emotionally available? What about, sharing uh, emotions to the point where, if I feel bad, I want my lover to feel bad too, or feel bad for me or with me, right?
Mhm.
The fact is when we're more emotionally resilient, we're more available. We're better lovers. We become better friends, better companions. We have so much more to give when we're not slaves to our emotions. And now automatically we change cell signaling. We change cell signaling because now the mind is not sending impulses to the brain, fight, flight, for example,
Mhm.
that the brain then translates in such a way that our stem cells are not able to regenerate the 50 billion with a B cells that have to be regenerated every 24-hour period for optimal health. That function gets degraded when the fight flight mechanism is engaged. And now the brain is sending these signals down the vagus nerve to the gut, down the central nervous system, and the cellular respiration gets impacted, right?
Yeah.
So it's directly connected to our emotional state. So that's emotional resilience. And now, of course, vibrant health is a piece that's so important because the body is a temple. And we say the body is the temple in which this highest power resides. Who wants to live in a dirty, impure temple, right? You wouldn't go and walk into a church with this garbage all over the place and it's stinking as you head in the door. So the body is the temple and it's a gift. And we are provided with so many alternative and wonderful methods for keeping the body whole. One of which is, of course, eating high nutrient dense, low calorie dense foods, eating for intracellular nutrition, eating foods that we know will provide the best nutrition for our cells. And in over 100 plus years, it's still plants. If someone comes along and proves otherwise, I will embrace that, but that hasn't been done yet, right? Still plants. But then there are other things, right? Restful sleep, because we have to be able to preserve our immune systems. Gut health, microbiome health, providing what the microbiome needs, because the gut is the largest of the four immune systems. And when the gut is not healthy, when we're suffering from leaky gut or dysbiosis, now the immune system is inflamed, it's out of whack, it's compromised, right? So focusing on gut health, very important. Of course, exercise is very important. Intermittent water fasting, my favorite, perhaps the greatest metabolic reboot on the planet. It was intermittent water fasting that saved my life. in that episode I shared earlier about being incredibly diabetic and having all of these other issues. So that's the list. And if you combine them in the right way and then integrate all four, you have a recipe for literally total well-being. Does it take some time and discipline? Yes, but
Mhm.
it's worth it. Hmm? Does
Yeah.
it take a change in lifestyle where you have to give it uh, 18 months minimum to 2 years or more? Yes. But is it worth it? Absolutely.
And you can, I mean, with everything you said, there's so much to unpack here. But
There is. Sorry.
and I mean, for me, I started with food, but then the meditation came in quickly. And it feels like, I mean, maybe you can talk about kind of like how it unfolded for you, but as soon as like the way that I teach is like we get them with the food, like change your diet, and then suddenly people become more calm and peaceful. And I even wanted to talk a little bit about when you talked about relationships and emotions, how the heart coherence is so important with that. So if you're eating a clean diet that doesn't have sugar, because sugar can affect your nervous system, and these, even gluten and all these things that affect the gut biome and make your brain not function properly, it's easier to argue. It's easier to feel irritable if you're feeding the bad bacteria. So starting with clean food is so important. It doesn't feed, the yeast, mold, and fungus in your body. And then from there, you want to meditate and you actually can sit still long enough because your joints aren't hurting anymore and your mind isn't going a mile a minute. So it's interesting how it's all so interwoven, and I think you can really start from anywhere. I mean, you could start as a meditator, you could start as a faster, and then like, oh, I like fasting, I'll start eating better. And so like where did you start and where would you suggest starting? Because there's just so much in all of that you said.
Well, you just made a very important point, which is that you can start anywhere, and I'm pretty sure what you infer by that is to start in the place that's most comfortable for you and easiest to start. So for me, originally, it was what you just described, that I started with macrobiotics as the basis for changing my diet. And that did open me more to wanting to embrace spiritual discipline. But I have to add one thing. Long before macrobiotics, I studied martial arts. And part of the requirement of my study in karate and kung fu was Zen meditation. And I actually lived in a Zen monastery for a year. And so I had already had a meditation practice. So it's hard for me to say whether the meditation made me more open to the macrobiotic
Mhm.
on a food level or vice versa. But does it matter? No. So I think people have to start where it's easiest for them. We have had many students and clients here who they understand the importance of changing what they eat, but they love good news about their bad habits, and they will not start there. However, they will start with meditation. And so many of our students and clients here, we begin with the spiritual power pillar. And once they experience this vast expanse of energy within themselves, that's beyond the mind and beyond the senses, once they understand that there's something to be experienced beyond the mind and beyond the senses, the witness to the mind, they develop much more courage in changing other aspects of their lifestyle. And then for others, it's definitely, well, I'm not interested in the spiritual stuff, the psychobabble. I, just give me the food and send me on my way. But some of those people return and they say, there's more to this now that I feel physically healthier. What more can you offer? So it's people have to start where they're most comfortable.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like you're right about like you use the analogy of walking into a dirty temple or a dirty church. When the body's clear, like what I found for me, because I got into this over 20 years ago, is my channel just became so much more clear. My intuition came in. Like I was thinking of people and they were calling me. My synchronicity started. I started doing more yoga and I learned about meditation and it just felt like there was this connection I had never in my life felt before because my body was clogged.
Mm.
So it's just like you're just cleaning that channel out, that huge channel that goes out the top of our head that we don't even know exists until we clean it out.
Absolutely. And so, there's more than one way to approach it.
Mhm.
However, I always like to remind people never to underestimate the spiritual power, this highest power, which is miraculous, which is
Yeah,
which is miraculous.
yeah.
And with that power on our side, literally anything can be accomplished. And
Yeah,
this
so
has been my
you're
experience and the experience of our students and clients here.
yeah, exactly. So people come to your school and you're just teaching these basic, I mean, maybe you can tell us, you're teaching kind of a lifestyle. So what would kind of like a day in the life look like?
So we call this part of our ecology of well-being. And we have two paths of study. Uh, One is for people who they're looking for answers, but they're not ready to follow any particular spiritual path or any kind of spiritual leadership or discipline. But they still want answers, and they're willing to meditate, and they're willing to chant. So that's one path of study that we offer, because that's fine. People have to start where they're most comfortable. And the other second path of study is for people who are really ready and they're looking for spiritual discipline and a certain degree of spiritual leadership in making the spiritual journey. And either way, both involve and integrate these four pillars.
Mhm.
And so I always come back to that. It's always about the four pillars. And so we have public programs. People can come for 90 minutes and they can hear a talk by myself, offered by myself or one of our staff, learn some meditation methods, engage in some chanting. And so that's a typical evening program that we offer several times a month. And then we have weekend retreats. Some of them are weekend meditation retreats, where the focus is wisdom of sages around the spiritual journey, combined with proved meditation methods for making the restless mind quiet, and some methods for spiritual discipline. And so those we do several times a year. And then we have a very big project that we do twice a year called the Total Wellbeing Challenge, which is a 90-day challenge where people are fully monitored in the lifestyle change with a big focus on vibrant health.
Mhm.
And so we have medical professionals that are engaged. We monitor people's blood tests. We show them how to read their blood test properly. And we take them through 90 days to help them to begin to make the lifestyle change. And we find it's a minimum of 90 days that people have to be engaged. This is home study modules combined with live one-on-one support on a regular basis, and an entire week of private sessions at the end. And then we take measurements and bloods 2 to 3 times during 90 days to measure people's progress. We're on our third one of these, and literally people are transformed. They come in to us with serious chronic health conditions and diseases that are reversed, and for some in 90 days, they're completely healed. And then we track them for a minimum of 2 years, and some for 5 years. We keep them engaged through various methods so that we can help them stay engaged with the lifestyle change in total, which is the four pillars integrated. And so that we can really encourage them and nurture their journey to make sure that the lifestyle change sticks. And then we have that information, that data for our case studies that tells us how this really works. So that's the Total Wellbeing Challenge.
Mhm.
And then there are people who come to us who we just find they're so frightened. Just everything is about fear. They operate from a place of fear. So we have a course that we've instituted, How to Conquer Fear with Love in the Age of Distractions. And so this is an extensive course that ends in a weekend retreat where we teach methods that will help people permanently overcome fear as a part of improving their mental state. And so those are our three that's what it would look like if people come to our school and say, well, what are my choices about where to start?
Right. And so for this 90-day program, you said it was off-site. So like, let's say someone that lived in California, how would they go about doing this? Would they
So
need, you know,
when they enroll, they have video modules,
uh-huh.
and it's a good deal of hours. I forget the exact, but we're probably talking about between 10 to 20 hours of home study.
Hmm.
That's very simplified step by step, with transcripts, with handouts to follow, and tests that they take, questionnaires. And then every week of the home study, they check in by Zoom
Hmm.
on a live webinar with one of our certified ecology of well-being practitioners to get questions answered, to check in to see how are you doing, what challenges are you having with what you're being instructed in doing. So that's every single week. And then there are blood tests that occur twice during the challenge so that we can measure their progress. And so we take a series of blood tests before they start. We blood test again during the challenge and then at the end. And so anyone who doesn't live in the region can engage in the entire home study, including the live webinars. And then when it comes to that full week of private sessions at the end, for people who don't live in the region, they get that via Zoom, right?
Okay.
Where they have direct contact, private sessions with a practitioner for an entire week. And
Okay.
so we accommodate people. And so as a result, of course, we have people from around the world who engage in this.
Yeah, that's excellent. And then, so how does it work with the food? Do you give them recipes and then they make their food at home?
Yes, we give them recipes, we give them guidance either with Zoom or those who are coming on site to show them how they can begin to cook easily. Most of the recipes are preparation 15 to 30 minutes max, some of them less. And then we also help people learn how to cook simply, because it's very hard to make the lifestyle change without having a relationship with food.
Yeah.
And so part of the relationship with food, we have a lot of people who don't know how to cook. And so then we have to teach them, which we do in this 90-day challenge. And then we also help people learn how easy it is to grow some of their own fruits and veggies, even if they don't have a garden, because now there are things like that they can get sock setups for planters and grow veggies on a windowsill.
Yeah.
So we lead them through all of these methods gently in a nurturing fashion, because people have to understand that it's not as hard as they think it is, but they need some leadership and nurturing in getting through it because it's new for most people.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the best way to do it, is to teach them how to fend for themselves, as opposed to like, so what I've seen a lot, because I've been to a lot of these healing centers all over the US at least, and other places too, that people come and they eat the food, but then when they leave, they're not quite integrated. Like, okay, I did this for 2 weeks, I lost 10 pounds, 20 pounds, I feel better. But then they go home and they're like, now what? Like nothing's set up. So I love the idea of having them slowly integrate at home and really like, it's already in their own home. And I find that that's, because I work with people similarly, it works way more successfully if they're already doing it at home, and they have to kind of struggle at first, but then they get it. They get it so much deeper.
You're absolutely right. And you have brought me to another point, because you've been to so many of these. And then there are, of course, the summits, right? And I know people who own every summit in the world on plant-based, but don't follow much of it. So we know from this, or what we can glean, is that information alone does not transform people. Leadership transforms people. Nurturing transforms people. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss, that they think that YouTube is there and I can go and collect videos on YouTube and buy these summits and then I'll be fine. Well, no, because we're creatures of habit.
Yes.
And it takes leadership to break habits that are bad.
Someone to answer your questions, and you need accountability. Like, this is 90 days and I'm going to have to check in and let them know that did I do it or did I not do it, and
Exactly.
how's my progress, and they're going to take my blood. So I love the way you've set this up, because I think it's a total setup for success. And as you know, once someone's gotten through the 90 days, they don't want to go back. Like, they'll go back maybe and like, oh, I had some wine or I had some sugar, and it's like, oh, I feel terrible. So the proof is in the pudding, as I say, in the chia pudding. They all they have to do is slip up a little bit and go, oh, I can't. Like, it's almost like you've created this new way of being that there's just they could never go back to the old way of being, and people don't realize that till they experience it.
And this is perfect what you're saying, because we have a little thing called the risk ratio test, where early on in any of our programs, we encourage people to go off the instruction and compare the two, and for themselves to decide, now tell us which one is better. Because to a certain extent, talk is cheap without having tested these in the laboratory of one's own existence. So we give people a little room to do this risk ratio test, because they always come back and say, your instruction is better, and now I know firsthand.
And exactly, they need to have that experience for themselves.
Yeah.
I want to segue into a few questions that I like to ask every guest, and one is, What brings you the most joy in life?
Serving people with the gifts that I have,
Hmm.
service. And it's something that I was taught by all of my whole life transformation and well-being mentors, and also my spiritual mentor, that all the love we give is really meant for us. In fact, there's a scientist named Harville Hendricks who proved that there's an enzyme released in the brain when we give selflessly. And that enzyme is responsible for sending a signal to the brain that we're actually receiving the nurturing that we're giving. So it's very interesting that even on a biological level, this is so.
Yeah,
So service, and that's what gives me the greatest joy, without which I don't even know that I'd have a reason for living.
I love that. And it's so true. I mean, I think we're designed, as pack animals to, like, when we nurture each other, we're nurturing ourselves as well. Like, if one's not well, we're all not well. And the coronavirus is perfect proof of that. I'm getting actually the chills that, like, when something starts to go wrong, the whole herd is affected. So, like,
Exactly.
just because I brought that up, like, how would you say that this is affecting our overall mentality and well-being, like, of what's happening on the planet right now?
I'm really glad you brought this up. And we have a whole life transformation summit that we're offering that's coming up in June, where as part of an additional step that people can take to upgrade, they're going to get our coronavirus handbook. I've assembled our own research team here. And what we're finding from pathologists, virologists, immunologists, researchers on the ground in almost every state in the US and also in Europe and Asia is that the data that they're getting from direct observation of working with people who are infected is very, very different from what we're being fed by mainstream media and our government. People have to understand this. How can we quickly understand that this is true? Ask anyone. Has our president or any public official come to your neighborhood to inspect what's going on? Have they come to your neighborhood to inspect if there are in fact lots of folks in the emergency rooms, as they're saying, hospitals overflowing with people? So here we've done this, they're all empty. There's nobody in these places, right? Have they talked with neighbors to say, how are you doing? How many people do you know who are infected? When we have tornadoes, natural disasters, the president is out with a mask and gloves and a construction hat, inspecting what's going on. None of the public officials have done this that I'm aware, and I'm talking with a lot of people in different states. They have not seen their public officials out on the ground. The officials are stuck in their offices and they're looking at computer models and they're mandating policy based on these models. So the first thing is we have to resist fear, because this is part of an old playbook of striking fear into people, because it's much easier to manipulate people when they're frightened. And what better way, right? And I don't know if this is true, but it's suspect enough for us to demand answers. What better way than to make people frightened of each other, that we're so frightened of each other because we think if we're going to spend any time in each other's company, we could get a disease that we're told is going to kill us. That's the best way to keep people complacent, the best way to prevent solidarity. And so it's a very clever part of the playbook. And I don't know whether it's an intentional or not, and it doesn't matter. The first thing is, don't be frightened. Calm down, chill out, and instead look at the facts. And the facts are on the ground that we're getting from doctors who are treating many, many patients who they believe are infected with COVID-19, is that those who are healthy, they recover in less than a week, some
Yeah.
of them in 24 hours. This is the number I've been given by every virologist who's seeing people, 85 to 90% of those infected. The people who are dying have underlying health conditions and diseases that they've had for a long time. Therefore, they have suppressed immune systems. And the cause of death are those underlying conditions and diseases, because the immune system basically says, I can't take one more thing that I
Exactly.
have to address. If you put a virus on me, that's it. I don't have enough energy to deal with all of these other diseases that you're infected with and a new virus. So it's compromised immune system. So I would say, don't fear. Instead, look at the ways in which you can enhance your immune system. We know that that's the key. That's one thing we do know. There's lots of controversy over whether or not COVID-19 is merely a name given to symptomology that could come from many different diseases.
Hmm.
In my own view, that is the case, but that could be debatable. Okay, regardless, if you're healthy, don't fear. Take steps to strengthen your immune system. Go outside, get fresh air, because that's healthy. It's not healthy to stay cooped up. That's not even healthy for sick people.
I
The
know.
sicker you are, the more you need to be outside with sunlight, with air, walking, exercising. So this premise of lockdown, stay in your homes, there's not only no scientific and medical basis for it, it's ludicrous from a
It's
health standpoint.
it
And
doesn't make
so,
any sense. It
hmm,
doesn't make any sense to me.
makes no sense. But this comes by way of fear, right?
Mhm.
What's one of the best ways to tackle fear? To get the facts. Now, we have to, if there's any conflict of interest in the data that we're being given that has been calling fact, we have to discard that data entirely and look for other sources. As a school, we didn't expect to be assembling a research team. It's
Mhm.
the last thing we had time to do. But when people on the ground started contacting me and saying, you need to look at this because this does not match what we're being told as the popular sentiment about COVID-19. And then I got on the phone with virologists and biologists, and they just opened our eyes to the point where we said, we have to share this information so that people understand, number one, COVID-19 is not a death sentence. Number two, it is more contagious, but not as virulent as even last year's flu. More contagious, but not as virulent.
Yeah.
And secondly, there are too many things that are suspect with the people who are giving us the data, who also own patents on viruses, who also own patents on vaccine. This
Yes.
is including Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's
Mhm.
being touted as the best infectious disease doctor on the planet, owns COVID-19 patents and vaccines. Now there's a conflict of interest. Does he have enough spiritual power to keep his conflict of interest away from his judgment? We don't know. And because we don't know, we have to discount everything that's coming out of his mouth. Best thing is to talk to the people on the ground. Are
Yep.
you a doctor? Great. How many COVID-19 patients did you see this month? 40? Okay. How many of those recovered? 38? Wow. And what did the other two die of? Underlying causes? Oh, okay. Now
That's
I don't need to worry, right? So proper data helps us to destroy fear,
it's
right? With
it's
intelligence.
yeah. It and I agree. Like mainstream media is the worst place to get your news.
Oh, absolutely.
Ask. I have a nurse that works at the local hospital. There's only one in bed, and there's zero COVID patients in the hospital. There was one person that was dying, and everybody was freaking out, and they wouldn't touch this man. She got up on top of him and put her hand on his heart and looked in his eyes and said, "Breathe with me," and he came back. And like they were gonna
Wow.
let him die because they were afraid. So this fear is not working, and it's the opposite of heart coherence. It's the opposite of spirituality. It's the opposite of being in service and everything we're here to do. And so I think that's what it's teaching us is that's not what we want.
And you just hit another very important point. Well, two very important points. The first thing is the example you just gave is the power of love. And love conquers everything. We just have to trust it. Love conquers everything. So what a wonderful story of just placing the practitioner placing the hands on the individual and the person coming back literally to life
Yeah.
is so important. And so this is what we've got to do. We've got to conquer fear with love. And then we have inspiration rather than desperation. Because with inspiration, we will not only get through this, but we'll get the right facts. We'll be able to determine what's safe and what's not, right? We don't know whether a global vaccine is going to be safe. Most of them aren't. But we don't know until we get the facts about what safety measures have been taken, right? But with inspiration, we can come up with alternatives. What are the alternatives? There are so many. So I'm talking with doctors on the ground in Wuhan who are healing patients with intravenous vitamin C. And oral vitamin C kills the virus, right?
Right.
SARS-CoV-2, by the way, is the virus. People have to understand COVID-19 is the name for the collection of symptoms of which many diseases can cause. The virus is SARS-CoV-2. It's a mutation from last year's SARS-CoV-1. Very, very possible, since we know that flu vaccines, because they're live vaccines, cause DNA mutations in our genes, that it's entirely possible that this mutation came from the vaccine. That's
Exactly.
not out of the question, right?
Yeah.
So instead, why not vitamin D3, sunshine, exercise, restful sleep? All of these things increase the strength of the immune system. Vitamin C. So we've put all of our people that we're talking to, if they're doing it orally, 10 to 20,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. If they need more than that, intravenous C, right?
Right.
Of course, you've got to eat high nutrient dense, low calorie dense foods that are pure, meaning organic, non-GMO, right? All of these things bolster the immune system. And I am speaking with doctors now who are treating COVID-19 patients in this way. And then, of course, the people who are really sick, yes, they've got to maintain a certain level of quarantine.
Yes, and
They've
there are
got to be much,
people that are really sick, but I think it's being very blown out of proportion. Like we're saying,
yes,
nobody even here in my town that has it that I know of, or if they do, it's
absolutely.
okay. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I
But in
agree.
other words, there are inspiring ways to go about this where we don't have to force this sick care mentality down people's throats. And secondly, the government has no business involved in attempting to control behavior around health. That's between you and your health practitioner or doctor and family members, right? In other words, you got kids, the kids are sick, you tell your kids, okay, you're not going to school today because I don't want you to infect the other kids, right? You're really sick with the flu, so you say, well, let me be responsible. I won't go into work because I don't want to spread it. These are behaviors that we as adults, we can apply to ourselves. We don't need a government that says, now we're going to give you passes, right? Anthony Fauci is talking about digital certificates. Bill Gates is talking about digital certificates so that if you refuse the vaccine that they're making together, then you will have less rights. You will have to show a card that says you didn't agree to the vaccine. What is this? They've got no business with their mitts on this stuff. So the other part of the intelligence that comes out of love, we can't demonize these people for qualities that we ourselves possess. We have to see the innocence in their shortcomings, but demand a change in the dialogue that's going to force a change in policy. And we can do that peacefully, with love and compassion, with people who come together in fearlessness,
Hmm.
with the intelligent data, of course.
So what would you say? Because just as to synopsize that, like, what's the
Sure.
best way someone like me in my town can like have an effect, um, and kind of help to educate people or just stand up for my rights without, because there's so much social shaming going on and people will publish something that I think is factual on Facebook and they'll get shamed and da da da, and so like people are afraid now to speak the truths that they're finding or even ask questions because there's so many people that are fear mongering and we're just caught in this trap and it's not really anybody's fault. I mean, maybe there's a fault at the top, but we just got to figure out a way to get out of it, like you said.
Well, here's what we're doing here. We're getting offline. So we're talking with people directly and we're saying, here's the data we have. That's why we're producing this coronavirus handbook as
Uh-huh.
part of our Whole Life Transformation Summit. We're encouraging people to get together in small groups and just to talk to each other, to say, well, how are you feeling about this? First, let's just hear how everybody's feeling. What are your fears? It's okay to be frightened, but now let's talk about how you can get past the fear. Here's the data. Here's what we're seeing. You go and you do more vetting on it so that you can decide. Don't just take our word for it,
Do your
vet
research.
it some more.
Yeah.
But having personal contact and talking to people in smaller groups and making simple decisions. So I just had a meeting last night and I asked the people in the group, how many of you have had a face-to-face sit down with your congressional representative? And none of them had. They said, I don't even know who that person is. We've got to be more conscious as a citizenry in understanding that the vaccine companies, the big pharma companies, have 4 special interest lobbyists for every single seated person in Congress. Those lobbyists are up in front of our congressional leaders every single day.
That's right.
So I said to this group, let's form a small community council And once a month, we will get on a bus or get in a car, drive to DC, make an appointment with our elected representatives,
Mhm.
and demand a meeting if necessary. And people are starting to do this, and sit down with them and tell them how we feel, what we found, and moreover, what we want. Because the problem is they don't hear from us.
Mhm.
Now, what's the matter? It doesn't take much. I'm in Youngstown. It's 5 hours to DC. How much effort could it take for 5 people or 10 people to get into a van, set a meeting, and go once a month so that our representatives face to face hear from us once every month? Does not require a lot of energy. The difference is if you write, if you call, the people in the offices have a pat form response that they're told to give for every single call they get, categorized, for every single email. And I know because I've written a lot of letters and I get this back. So the way is face to face. Go and meet with them like the lobbyists do. So we
Yeah.
can do that.
Okay.
We can do that. We can have 1 or 2 meetings a month in community groups and then share what we're doing with other communities. And to say, even though we have representatives, these are the issues we want to be heard on. This is what we're experiencing. This is what we're observing, like with COVID-19. And okay, now we've got all this data together. We know what we want. Let's send our community representatives to meet with our officials once a month. And you tell them, I'm going to be here every single month until you hear me. Because that's what the lobbyists do.
Yeah. You just got to make
So
it.
why can't we do that? Of course we can do that. Simple,
Yeah.
but this is a simple thing, right? I would drive a total of 10 hours once a month to DC and back, or get on a plane, it's a half an hour, or rail, it's 3 hours, and do that once a month with a group of 5 people. So we can do this. See, we're more engaged that way.
Yes.
And it's face to face, and it's the only way they're going to take us seriously, because so much time has elapsed when they haven't heard from us. And it's just part of the nature of things that if they don't hear from us, they assume they can do what they want. They assume they can make decisions on our behalf, because a lot of these people believe they're just more intelligent anyway. I saw a horrible thing. Dianne Feinstein, who I have a lot of respect for, met with some teenagers who got on a bus, demanded a meeting with her. She said, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And they voiced their concerns about the environment. And do you know what she said? She said, how many of you are registered voters? Of course, none of them were, because they were underage. They're these 14 to 17 years old. This was so ignorant and such a stupid thing to do. And so the kids said, well, no, we don't vote. We want you to know our concerns growing up in this society. And she said, well, come back when you're a registered voter. So, what should have happened that didn't happen is then the next meeting should have been with the parents of those kids. The parents should have said, here, I'm here with my kid, and I heard that you told my child this. Is this true? Because I vote. Now you tell me if you actually said that to my child. What's the matter with you, right? So we've got to be in their face.
Yeah, get more involved. That's super great
but
advice.
Compassionately, not to demonize, just to say, look, we want to be heard. We want you to know what we want, and you're our representatives, right? To get past the blame game, which doesn't help anyone, and to understand that, everybody's got weaknesses. We have to see the innocence in shortcomings, even to get people to hear us, right? Let alone reach them. We have to be willing to take that step. And that's a method that has worked. We know this. How do we know this? Nelson Mandela. Gandhiji, how did they obtain the freedom for their societies? With this exact method, by having compassion and love toward their oppressors and saying, I'm not going to demonize you for qualities that we all possess. Instead, I'm going to talk to you with love, but I'm going to be firm in what has to happen, right? And that's the way. And so, of course, this requires a good deal of courage.
Yeah, it does. And I guess that's the call of the day, is courage and standing up for our rights. Wow, that's a lot. There's a lot packed in there. Okay.
There is, but it just some of this is just spontaneous when we focus on our own lifestyle change and healing our predicaments and healing our bodies, that we're inspired spontaneously to these things. I'm not a genius by any means, but this comes out of just inspiration that I then choose to act on and share with others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So what is something that you're working on perfecting about yourself at the moment?
Uh, I have a term here that I like to focus on, and it's excellence. Um, Excellence breeds and harnesses spiritual power. And so, what I'm always working on is how can I, without being focused on outcomes, how can I just make the offering more excellent than it is, or better it to the point where it is excellent? And that's what I'm consistently working on with respect to myself and how I approach our offering. To make it a blessed sacrament, though, not to focus on the control of the outcome, because outcomes don't belong to me, they don't belong to us. The activity, the offering and perfecting it, that's what belongs to us. And for me, it's a matter of excellence. And can I do better to ensure that excellence in the offering?
Yeah, yeah. And what's your favorite healthy food or supplement?
I don't take a lot of supplements. I'm very careful, although here in Youngstown, we don't get a lot of sun. So I would have to say my favorite supplement in that regard is vitamin D3.
Hmm.
But I try and spend 20 or 30 minutes out in sunshine 3 or 4 times a week. And then favorite food, I don't know if I have one favorite. I love veggies. And I can just, I eat 2,500, 28 calories per day of veggies, organic veggies, some organic fruit, uh, beans. Fiber is so necessary, right? So I love organic taro, Japanese yam, that I eat a good deal of during the week. But just veggies.
Yeah. Are you still focusing on a macrobiotic diet, or is it more? Do you eat fresh? Because I know macrobiotic doesn't have as many fresh foods; it's more cooked. Do you have a balance?
Cooked rather than raw, yes. And I eat some raw food, but I'm predominantly cooked food.
Okay, just
Because
easier.
for my body, that works. And there are lots of people for which we find that's the reverse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but I would say the majority of our clients and students have difficulty when they eat a lot of raw food. Now, part of that, I'm sure, is dysbiosis, it's lack of gut health. Because if your microbiota, if your gut is strong, and if you're not suffering from leaky gut, then certainly raw veggies are great because they're so nutrient dense. But then there are, of course, people with different chronic health conditions, certain cancers like blood cancer, where you really shouldn't be eating raw because you already have DNA mutations that confuse the immune system to the point where you have autoimmune systems when you eat raw food. We have people who have that issue. So I would say mostly cook. I love raw food, don't get me wrong. It's just, I'm more acclimated to cooking. I find that works better for my body. But either way, the thing is, it's got to be real food.
Yeah, fresh, yeah, whole food. Yeah, yeah, I love that. And it is different for every person and where they're at in life and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you wanted to have, you're going to do a meditation for us at the end, which I love. And before we go into that, because I think that would be a great way to end, is there a tip that you can give our listeners to start living better today? Like one thing that they can just like, after they stop listening, like, okay, I can do this right away. I don't have to wait.
Yes. Uh, well, I'm going to give two things because the meditation method I'm going to lead people in is one method they can do right away. It's so easy to replicate. And then the second is to, intention is everything. So the second would be to resolve, to, in this year, to make one simple change that you know will be a step to changing your lifestyle. One simple step. Like, for example, okay, for 90 days, I'm going to stop eating processed sugar. And I'm just going to note how I feel. Or for 90 days, I'm going to stop eating red meat and see if I feel better, right? Just one thing, just keep it simple, just one thing. So I would say that, plus the meditation method I'm going to offer whenever we're ready.
Yeah, okay. And so before we start the meditation, what is the best way for people to find you? And I will put all of this in the show notes for anybody listening, whether it's on YouTube or on the podcast that you can find. But yeah, how do we get a hold of you?
Thank you. The first would be to go to bhaktaschool.org, and I'm going to spell that phonetically because some people have problem with that first part. It's uh, B as in Bob, H as in Harold, A as in Apple, K as in Karen, T as in Thomas, A as in Apple. Bhakta and then school, one word, .org is the site for our school. And then I would strongly encourage people to visit wholelifetransformation.org. Sorry, Whole Life Transformation Summit.org, Whole Life Transformation Summit.org for our upcoming summit. We've got 18 to 20 experts in the field of whole life transformation interviews. They're going to be speaking and sharing tools, methods, ideas, and how they healed. And so it's a great event, and I would encourage people to visit there. And so those are two places to start.
Okay. And that event you're talking about is the June of 2020 event, the summit?
Yes, June 15th through June 22nd, but registration, which is free, is open now.
Okay, great. So that'll be all in the show notes. And yeah, I'd love to end with this meditation. I'm actually really excited about it. So anytime you're ready, oops, just hit my microphone. Anytime you're ready, you can just take us right into it. I think it's a great way to end.
So this is known as witness consciousness centering. It's a simple method to take us beyond the mind and beyond the senses to the witness to the mind. And so first thing is gently close your eyes and just take 3 deep breaths, breathing in as deeply as you can. Exhaling as far as you can go. And again, breathing in as deeply as you can. Exhaling as far as you can go. You can do that one more time at your own pace. And now you can breathe normally. Pay attention to the sound that your breath makes as you follow along with my voice. Right now, observe any thoughts that you have in your mind passively, without any reaction or response whatsoever. As if you're lying in a field on your back, looking up at the sky, and clouds are coming and going, but they come and go. They don't stay there forever. Observe your thoughts passively in this way. No reaction, no response. A reaction would be, now this is meditation and I'm thinking of pizza. Why am I thinking of pizza now when I'm supposed to be meditating? That's a reaction. Avoid that. Just observe your thoughts coming and going passively. Just watch them come and go and bring your mind gently back to the sound that your breath makes. So practice this over and over again until you hear my voice again. Very good. So now you can just take a deep breath, breathing in slowly and steadily, and then exhaling slowly and steadily. And now you can gently open your eyes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And thank you for the blessing of having me.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.